Alright guys, how's everyone doing? This video coincides with your 9A and C notes on the growth of the Catholic Church and the rise of the Holy Roman Empire. And just before we get started, let me go ahead and frame this. This is the unfinished map, the finished map you can find. But as you guys can see, we've zoomed out. We spent most of the second quarter just talking about an area right around here, North Africa, a little bit of the Middle East, and the Mediterranean Basin. And then last unit, we spread that area to include more of the Middle East, most of the Arabian Peninsula. Now we're talking about all of Europe. All right. 2 units ago, we talked about the fall of the Roman Empire. Since then, we've now talked about the Byzantine Empire and Islam and the Muslim Empire. So when the Roman Empire falls in the West, we have the Eastern Roman Empire becomes the Byzantines. We talked about them. At a similar window of time, we have a Muslim empire that's going to encompass North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and parts of Spain. Now in this unit, we are going to talk about what happens in the former Western Roman Empire. So now that we are framed, let's go ahead and start talking about the end of the Western Roman Empire. So towards the end of the Western Roman Empire, missionaries work with neighboring Germanic and Celtic tribes spreading Christianity, specifically Catholicism. Guys, remember, you can pause this video at any point in time. I'm going to keep moving because there's a lot of stuff on it. Alright, so this is before the empire falls. Back to my next thing. Alright, these converts, after the fall of the empire, are going to eventually settle in lands that once belonged to the empire. Western Europe, Germany, France, areas such as that. Now, we've talked about previously how eventually there would cease to be a Roman emperor, and when that happens, the Pope would take his quote-unquote place. Pope Gregory I is the first pope to do that. The Roman emperor is killed by invaders, and Pope Gregory I kind of assumes the role of emperor. He's going to raise armies. He repairs roads throughout Christian lands. He helps the poor, and he negotiates treaties with invaders. Okay, and he makes his palace the center of government, Vatican City. So at this point in time now, right after the fall of the Roman Empire, so around the year 476, we've hit a point in time where the Pope is almost like the acting emperor. He is the de facto emperor. Okay, so the Pope has all the power. Cool, moving on. Alrighty. So, secular authority is going to decline and the power of church increases. This doesn't just happen across the entire region when there's no emperor and there's just the Pope now. This is going to happen locally as well. Secular means non-religious. Keep that in mind. So if you ever hear me use that term, I'm referring to things that are not religious. Alright, so remember, with the Roman Empire, we didn't just have the emperor in Rome. We also had bureaucrats and Roman legions. We had the empire spread out throughout the lands. Now, the Christian church will also start to spread out throughout the lands, but then with no empire, with no might, the tax collectors can't collect the taxes. They can't pay for the army. All that's left behind is the church. So in local areas, the power of the church is going to increase. This is going to be impacted even more so when high-level church officials start coming from noble families. So the church is going to have ties to the ruling class. So while there's no big national organization, there's still power hierarchies in local areas. So maybe we don't have the King of the United States or the King of Virginia anymore, but we might still have the Baron of Bristow. And so if I'm the Baron of Bristow and I've got a couple of kids, I got 2 sons, the oldest one's going to be my heir. And the youngest one's not just going to sit around playing PlayStation his whole life. We're going to do something to allow my family to further its power and gain its influence. So maybe I put him in the church and he becomes the bishop, so that my 2 sons would then be both the Baron and the Bishop of Bristow. Now the thing with all of this is the Pope is going to end up having more property and wealth than any individual king. So all of the kings are going to have to cooperate with the Pope. We don't have a king of all of Western Europe. We have tiny little ones, little tribes in Germany. We'll talk about Frankish kings here in a second. But at the end of the day, the Pope is going to have more power and wealth. Okay, and if you guys have not figured this out yet, land plus money equals power. Still does, always has, always will. Well, I mean, maybe we'll ascend to a further level where it doesn't. But that's what it is now. So the Pope is the most powerful person in Western Europe at this point in time. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the Frankish kingdom. Okay, several of our Germanic rulers are going to convert to Christianity. A guy named Clovis is the first Christian king of the Franks. And by 511, he has actually spread his kingdom and Christianity to most of what is modern-day France. We talked about this last unit, where we have Charles Martel is actually going to lead the Frankish army to defeat the Muslims at the Battle of Tours. And if we remember, that's significant because it stops the Muslims from overrunning Europe. The Franks were the strongest power in Europe at that point in time. They were the only ones who could stand up to the Muslim Empire. So 40 years after the fall of the Roman Empire, we do have a almost united what becomes present-day France. It's not calling themselves France, okay? And they go through about 200 years or so as a Christian kingdom known as the Franks, and slowly growing in power. Eventually they're capable of defeating the Muslims at Tours. Now one of the next kings is another guy known as Charlemagne. Alright, now Charlemagne is going to become king of the Franks in the year 771. He is going to reunite Western Europe, so he actually is going to grow this empire to include more than just present-day France. He's going to extend it to include parts of Germany and even a good chunk of Italy. He's going to reunite most of Western Europe. He spreads Christianity throughout this empire, forcing conversion upon people who had not converted before. This was one of our first cases of the Christian approach to convert or die. And then during his time, we're also going to have monasteries set up as schools to train future priests. So monasteries start creating schools with the purpose of training future priests. These are called seminaries. We'll get back to those later. Now, around the year 800, one of Charlemagne's buddies, the Pope, is under threat of attack in the Vatican City. So Charlemagne takes his Frankish army, marches to the Vatican, saves the Pope from attack, and the Pope rewards him by crowning him the Holy Roman Emperor. And that is what we're going to have in what becomes known as the Holy Roman Empire. And as we said, it wasn't just the Franks. We're across the Rhine River into Germany, almost into the Bavaria. They're going to have portions of Spain. It gets a little bit larger than that. He's reuniting a good chunk of what we know of as Western Europe. Alright, now the Holy Roman Empire. Under Charlemagne, his empire is eventually going to include, as we said, much of Western Europe. The empire is going to reinterpret Roman culture. They're going to build churches, schools, and roads to unify various territories. And just for the record, ding, 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 ding on our empire bingo as to which of our common themes for a successful empire we were going to have. This time it's roads again. Makes trade a lot easier. And the big art form that we're going to see arise in the Holy Roman Empire and throughout Middle Ages is what becomes known as Gothic art. No, these are not the kids wearing black clothes and eyeliner who, they make fun of on South Park, okay? This is what it's what we actually know of as Gothic culture, which glorifies Christianity. It's generally, when we talk of Middle Ages art, that is what we're speaking of. And the most easiest way to express it are Gothic cathedrals, most of which are built during this time period. And this one up here was actually commissioned by Charlemagne before his death, and he was actually buried at it. Okay, so we have our Gothic cathedrals. You guys know Notre Dame in Paris, among others. Those are Gothic cathedrals, and that art form that comes to rise in the Holy Roman Empire and in its aftermath. All right, we also know it as medieval culture. Medieval culture is a blend of the following. Okay, classical Roman culture, Christian beliefs that are increasingly influenced by the Roman Catholic Church. So not just Christian beliefs, more Roman Catholic. Okay, and then customs of Germanic tribes. All right. As we have said. Now, the church and education. Many monastic orders are going to be formed during this time period. Okay, and there's a couple of terms you have to know here. Monks and nuns. Monks and nuns live in monasteries. They live away from the world. They are not among the people. Okay, we actually have a convent right up here on the corner of Linton Hall and Sudley Manor. Now, mendicants are friars. They live by begging, and they spread the word of God to the people. So they live amongst the people. A great example one of my students came up with for a mendicant is Friar Tuck. Okay, Friar Tuck from your Robin Hood legend is a mendicant. He lives amongst the people, and he begs. All right. Now, this is the third place where we're going to see Greco-Roman cultural achievements preserved, and it's preserved in these monasteries. Okay, these monasteries are also going to house schools that taught the sons of nobles Latin and Greek texts. Missionaries are going to carry the Latin alphabet and Christianity throughout the area and to Germanic tribes. But back to these monasteries. So these monasteries are the third place we're going to preserve Greco-Roman achievements. It also happens in the Byzantine Empire, and we're also going to see it done in our Muslim houses of knowledge in Baghdad when they're translated to Arabic. Okay, here they're preserved in Latin, and they're preserved by monks and nuns living in monasteries. And these monasteries become the centers of schools. Initially, they're those seminaries where we're training future priests, but eventually, sons of nobles are going to be sent there to be educated, to learn to read and study Greek and Latin texts. And what this becomes the basis of a system that we have in place right now. Guys, if you happen to go to a private Christian college, there's a strong chance that there are monks and nuns living and teaching there. The school I went to, St. Bonaventure University, is very much one of those. We have a monastery on campus and a convent across the street. We had monks and nuns teaching class. In fact, a nun is actually the school president right now. The basis for this started during the Holy Roman Empire, where they preserved these Greco-Roman cultural achievements. They preserved this knowledge, and you go to these monasteries to learn from these monks and nuns. Okay? Now, organization of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, the Roman Catholic Church has a relatively strict organization. I'm going to type just because. All right, and the way it works is we have the Pope. Pope is the head of the church, and he interacts regularly with rulers. Okay, he doesn't deal with, little people, everyday people. Let's go with a different color just so you guys can see it. All right, so he interacts with rulers. Now, cardinals are not the football team in Arizona. All right, what cardinals are is they help the Pope run the church. Church. And then the cardinals are also select the next pope. From themselves, from amongst themselves. So when we have what they call conclave, we had one about 2 years ago, to choose a new pope, it's actually going to be the cardinals who select them. All right? Now, the cardinals don't interact with a whole lot of people because they're at the Vatican. Okay, so they stay locked away in the Vatican. They don't have much interaction. Now, bishops are usually in charge of a town or a region. So they supervise a series of churches, okay? Supervise a number of churches. Okay? And a bishop is usually going to be interacting with local lords, interacts with, ooh boy, with lords and vassals. Okay, so not with everyday townspeople, but people with reasonable amounts of power. Now, priests are they're in charge of a single church, and they interact with those townspeople. They're the ones who have day-to-day interactions with people. Okay. Alright, so that is our hierarchy within the Catholic Church. And what this hierarchy does is it allows the Church to have interactions on a day-to-day basis with many people across all social classes. You have the Pope interacting with the heads of state, kings, local rulers. You have the cardinals making it so that the Pope can focus on those things. The bishop might be in charge of a town or a region. He supervises an area. He's interacting with the local lords. So in our example where we have the Baron of Bristow, that's who the bishop interacts with. Okay, the bishop's not interacting with Joe Schmo on the corner of the street. And then priests, they're the guys interacting with Joe Schmo on the corner of the street. They're in charge of a single church, okay, and day-to-day interactions with commoners. So that's our hierarchy within the Catholic Church. Now, guys, I've got a series of practice SOL questions you can flip through. I'm going to flip through them quickly, so just pause the video to take a minute to answer them and think about them yourselves. That's the first set. Second set. And third set. And that's going to be all for this video.